Former FBI Director James Comey puts out an Instagram post that many believe called for the assassination of President Trump. Well, now Comey has come out saying his post was taken out of context, claiming he disavows all forms of violence.
Oh, yes. I'm old enough to remember when James Comey was called competent and good by establishment Republicans, and we were reliably assured he was a great guy. This is all a misunderstanding, sure. Meanwhile, Trump can't say the word fight without mass hysteria in the media.
Yeah, a group of blue state Republicans, they're trying to sprinkle some salt or state and local tax deductions into Trump's big, beautiful bill.
Look, obviously we have a lot of wealthy Californians and New Yorkers that need federal tax relief, of course.
Yeah. Oh, and we have a MAHA alert, a common ingredient in energy drinks. It could give you blood cancer.
I almost spit out my Red Bull, but I didn't. I kept drinking it.
Thank goodness you're okay. All right. Well, we've got a jam-packed show for you tonight. Blaze News, The Mandate, it starts right now. Well, hey there. Good evening. I am Hilary Kennedy. I'm filling in for Jill Savage, but I am joined by a familiar face, Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson. Glad you're here. We made it to the end of the week.
Yes, we made it. We made it. And we have Hilary to boot. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. All right. So if you have been on the internet the last 24 hours, you know that former FBI Director James Comey likes a long walk on the beach. Apparently, he stumbled upon this seashell formation.
Yeah, he posted this image, 8647, and as my friend Rachel Bovard posted, this reminded her of a teenage girl's diary. See, here's this Mean Girls take on Comey that I think is spot on. All
right, well, joining us tonight is investigative reporter Breanna Morello, who has been closely following this story from the beginning. So, Breanna, I want you to give us some insight. Is this just some casual night at the beach that caught Comey's eye, or is there a deeper message that he's got going on here?
All right, well, James Comey has a habit of finding these shells by the beach, one even saying Harris's last name on it. I'm sure that was just a natural come about, of course. So I think that obviously this is it's discreet enough where you can't criminally charge him with it, although I would love to see him get arrested. But ultimately, it's very obvious what's going on here. 86, I used to be a bartender and a waitress. I know I have ties to AOC, of course. But we used to talk about 86 all the time. It's when something's gone. You make it go away. You take it off a menu. That's exactly what he's saying here. 8647. Obviously, we've seen 2 failed assassination attempts against President Trump's life. And thank God they were failed assassination attempts. But man, oh man, do these people love to egg on their radical, far left, mentally unwell supporters to go out there and try to kill the president.
Yeah, you know, Breanna, we were on a chat today with some of the people at Blaze, and one of the guys said, look, I remember getting 86 from a bar. You know, exactly. 86, get kicked out. You know, technically it is, you know, it means you're gonna kill the person. Yeah. People use it metaphorically, but I think what we could say here is when you are who James Comey is, right? when you are James Comey, you were in charge of the most powerful, enforcement body in the country. This is obviously a kind of different thing to post. And I have to say, I mean, it's interesting, the response to me, because maybe the assassinations and because of the weaponization of the deep state, it seems to me there's more awareness of that now than there has been in a while. You know, for instance, one person who clearly believes Comey is sending a veiled signal is the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who voiced sharp concerns about the situation last night, almost right away, on Fox with Jesse Waters. We should watch.
Are you buying that the former FBI director didn't know what 86 Trump meant?
Absolutely not, Jesse. That is a ridiculous and insane statement to make, certainly within this context, but especially coming from a guy who's the former director of the FBI. A guy who spent most of his career prosecuting mobsters and gangsters, people who know and execute other humans and use this exact lingo of 86. This is the guy who's issuing a hit on President Trump, the president that the American people voted for. We, the American people, cannot take this lightly. Whatever your politics, we cannot allow people to get by without being held accountable for this kind of public call to assassinate the president of the United States. The rule of law says people like him who issue direct threats against the president of the United States, essentially issuing a call to assassinate him, must be held accountable under the law.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do.
Okay, so Breanna, are we to believe that the former director of the FBI, former deputy attorney general at the Department of Justice, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York didn't understand what 8647 represents?
Yeah, I think he knew exactly what it represents. But like you just said, his resume gives him all the qualifications to know how to tread lightly on something, right? So now he could sit there and say, oh, well, that's not what it meant. It was just, something that I saw that caught my eye. And he could give it any type of belief as to what he thought it meant at the time. But the rest of us know that that's exactly what it meant. And I think it's telling. I was just talking to someone on my show about this the other day in regards to the second assassination attempt on President Trump. That individual who is currently awaiting his criminal trial, it's very obvious when you look at his background and all the evidence the DOJ has been putting forward that this is an individual who has a violent past and is looking for all these smoke signals like the one we just saw that James Comey posted on his page, on his Instagram page, right? Those type of people, somebody who, he's accused by the DOJ of working with human traffickers to bring an Afghan family into the country because he felt so righteous about the left-wing causes and all of this. And he was also trying to buy a rocket, according to the DOJ. So people like that are going to see things like what Comey just posted, and they're going to go all in on this. So Tulsi Gabbard is 100% correct. We need to take this as a threat, treat it like a threat, and put anyone who threatens President Trump's life in prison.
I agree, because I think you're right. I think there are people sitting around waiting for those kinds of signals, thinking, oh, I'm being told, or I believe that there's a secret message that's telling me I need to do something about this. So he should be held accountable. At the very least, they need to bring him in and do some very serious questioning, and then hopefully it would lead to something. But as we've seen, that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, it's bizarre given the people who tell us about, unseemly rhetoric all the time are on the left or centrists, quote unquote. And then they're going to defend this and, oh, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. Well, we know damn well if the shoe's on the other foot, what's going to happen. But I think the fact that there's been 2 assassination attempts in the last year, and Comey knows that. I don't usually say stuff like this, but in this instance, I can see how a rational person would say this is like a wink, wink, nod, nod, given what we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, do you guys remember the story of the Utah man when Joe Biden was in the White House, occupying the White House? There was an individual who was apparently making threats to Joe Biden's life, and the FBI got involved. Not Secret Service, which is the norm. Normally it would be Secret Service. The FBI was the one to go and get a warrant and search this man's home. They alleged that when he came to the door, when they were serving the warrant, that he had a gun in his hand, and they opened fire and shot him, killed him, and he died there. They dragged his body to the side of the street, and he died on the side of the street. That was the level that the FBI took to protect Joe Biden's life. Will that be the same extent that they go with Comey? I don't know. Obviously, they should execute a search warrant on his home. Obviously, the violent part after that, I'm not advocating for that, but I'm advocating for the fact that when there was a threat on Joe Biden's life, a warrant was served. They went after him. They arrested him. They went through his home to go find anything else that they could find. You should probably do that same exact type of treatment to the former FBI director.
Well, I think it's just another example of how unhinged Democrats have been in the last couple of years, especially this year, burning down Tesla dealerships, the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. That was something that was such a big deal. Members of Congress storming the Newark Immigration Detention Center, and then President Trump facing 2 assassination attempts. This just keeps going on, and they're letting it go. They're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and they often bury the facts, right? We know nothing about the first suspect, who's obviously now dead, but we know nothing about him. We know a little bit about the second suspect, but no one's publicizing much of that information that the DOJ is now putting out there. It's this constant, they've allowed all these people to go after President Trump, and there's very little ramifications for it. Secret Service was an epic failure the first time around, and I would argue they were an epic failure the second time around as well, when they were able to allow someone to be on his property for several hours without anyone spotting him and removing him quickly. And there's there's also other reports too that came out from Headline USA in regards to that same suspect, the second one, that he was interacting with local sheriffs in Palm Beach County just days before all of this, and he had stolen plates on his car. The DOJ alleged, or the local state prosecutors allege, and for some reason the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office wasn't able to make an arrest or even know about this until it was too late. So there seems to be missteps on President Trump whenever it's his life that's at risk, and I actually don't even think that there was just two at this point. I think it's fair to say that there's been multiple, according to my sources, there's been multiple attempts to kill President Trump. A lot of these, though, obviously have not been publicized. Two of them were very well known because they were very open in the public, but the other ones, they keep it hush hush, and rightfully so, because you don't want to antagonize anyone else to go out there and do it.
No, it makes sense, but what doesn't make sense is the rabid nature of it's not just the left. It's actually, I think Comey is indicative of the real problem. I mean, Comey represents the uniparty and the kind of hatred that he has in his heart, in the kind of the way in which he talks about. Well, we should show what he said, right?
Yes.
Let's look
He
at what
was forced to respond.
Yeah, it's a very interesting response here.
Yeah, he said, I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. Does anyone here at this table think he's being sincere?
No.
There's no way.
No.
It's like, what kind of insincerity is that, though? I mean,
Why would you take a picture and post it on Instagram?
yeah.
It doesn't even match his previous posts either. He doesn't have like random beach shells on his didn't have before he deleted his page, all these images of beach shells on the beach. So yeah, I would say really bad cop out. Probably should hire a crisis management team as well as defense attorneys.
Yes. Well, and don't you feel like if you came across something like that and you thought it was funny or interesting, I think a lot of us would maybe text it to a friend or a loved one and ha ha ha, but not post it for the world to see.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely sending some sort of message by doing that, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, if he was boomer posting, you know, this is Grandpa Comey, and he's on one side or the other, and he's pissed off, and he just 86, this president I don't like. That's one thing. But again, it's who he is in his position, what he said in the past, the way that he's acted over the years. And that's why, you know, when you see stuff like this, maybe he's just a dumbass and he just, you know, he really did this just fell out in some dumb way. But it's like people are going to look at this and go, there's more here. You know, this is very serious because of the environment we're in. And if you can't see that, I mean, sort of like what Trump said, if you can't see that, you know, as being James Comey, then, you know, you really are a dumbass. And I don't think he's that stupid, although I don't think he's that smart either.
Well, and we have a clip of President Trump also. He sat down with Bret Baier and expressed his thoughts on the matter. I think, do we have a clip of that?
That meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant. And he did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard. Because people like me, and they like what's happening with our country. Our country has become respected again, and all this. And he's calling for the assassination of the president.
Obviously, he apologized and said he doesn't.
Well, he
wasn't
apologized
calling
because he
for
was
violence. But
look, he's a very bad.
What do you want to see happen?
What
do you want to see happen?
I don't want to take a position on it because that's going to be up to Pam and all of the great people. But I will say this: I think it's a terrible thing, and when you add his history to that. If he had a clean history, he doesn't. He's a dirty cop. He's a dirty cop. And if he had a clean history, I could understand if there was a leniency.
Look, I mean, I agree 100% with that. I mean, that was like Trump at his best. And I loved him leaned over there just being really serious. Look, you know, it's like laid back Trump is powerful. Love it.
Yeah, my stomach turns whenever he says it's up to Pam Bondi, though. I mean, Pam Bondi has been a real snooze fest when it comes to going after these gangsters, these government gangsters, as Kash Patel used to love to call them. And for some reason now, we just haven't heard any movement on going after these people who not only have encouraged the assassination of President Trump with their lies and their hatred that they go on cable news to to spew every day. But now, I mean, I don't know. I'm not very confident that Pam Body's going to make the right move on this. I think that I would love to find the metadata on that photo to see when it was taken, because I think that's really telling. Did he wait strategically for a certain date to drop that photo so that it was a nice line or excuse, or was it sent to him? I'd also love to see those shells and get those fingerprinted to see if he placed it there or if it was somebody else. I don't know if Pam Body's really up for that task, but I am.
Well, and Kash Patel was actually forced to say something too. He said, "We're aware of the recent social media post by former FBI Director James Comey directed at President Trump. We're in communication with the Secret Service and Director Curran. Primary jurisdiction is what assess on these matters, and we, the FBI, will provide all the necessary information." But again, we don't really get a sense that anything's going to come from that. But maybe.
Strongly worded tweets.
Right.
That's what you just
yeah,
got.
that's exactly right.
I love those.
I love your point about the metadata, though. I think that is so smart, and that would be very telling.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I will say the one silver lining is I do feel like there were a lot of people who took this much more seriously than would have in the past, and there was more of a firestorm than there was in the past. And you had powerful government officials at least talking about it seriously, which I do think is actually an improvement. I mean, and Tulsi saying he should be arrested. So
Yeah, I know.
I'll take that, but I'd like to see James Comey arrested for other reasons. But let's talk about another Comey. Maurene Comey, the daughter of the former FBI director. Maurene is the lead prosecutor in the Diddy trial. And this is something that is, taking over the nation, I wouldn't say by storm, but people are definitely paying attention. So over the last 2 days, Diddy's longtime girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, has been on the stand, and she's dropped a few bombshells, sex, drugs, exploding cars, some interesting stuff. Breanna, what kind of case is Maurene Comey presenting here, though, against Diddy?
I would say a weak one, because the charges against him don't include anything related to their sex life and these swinger parties that they would both be throwing. It has to do with sex trafficking and racketeering, which is a huge argument that they have to make right now in front of the jury. Now, what we've seen, obviously, and the defense isn't even arguing this. They, in their opening statement, said, you're going to see a video of Diddy, and he is going to be assaulting his ex-girlfriend, and it's awful, but that's not why you're here. You're not here for assault. You're not here for blackmail. You're not here for domestic violence. You are here for sex trafficking and RICO. And so far, the prosecutors haven't even really made a case against Diddy in any of those instances. I will say that actually they've made a stronger case against Cassie, likely that she committed those crimes rather than Diddy. And here's why I feel that way. Cassie has now openly admitted that she did pay these prostitutes. So the money went from her to them. Now, yes, you could sit here and say that Diddy was likely the one who gave her the money, but you have to establish that Diddy knew that he was giving her money for sex workers. That's a really hard thing. They haven't yet done that or made that connection at all, or even asked her that question, it looks like. Also, there's these text messages that came up during the Friday testimony, and she was grilled on it. In text messages, she's literally telling Diddy that she'd rather hire a female prostitute for one of their freak-offs than a male. Now, that to me is sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. But again, she's initiating it. That doesn't sound like he's initiating it. And so far, the prosecutors haven't really punched back on that front either. So the defense, although they're, I would say, mediocre attorneys, the prosecutors just feel like they're dropping the ball. And I'm starting to think it's intentional.
Well, I felt like the defense came out really strong, as you said, by saying, hey, he's not a moral guy. You can disagree with his lifestyle, but did he do these things that he's accused of? And so when they started going through the text messages and making Cassie read them on the stand, which how uncomfortable. Yeah. She's very, very pregnant, just a very awkward situation all the way around. But there are these messages where she is saying things like, I loved the freak off last night, or yes, how about we do one this weekend? And it just paints her as a very active participant, because this went on for years. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to say, well, she was being coerced if you've got this much evidence where she's clearly saying, yes, I can't wait to participate, or I enjoyed last night, or whatever it was. Yeah. So it's going to be a tough case to prove. Why do you think we aren't hearing about any of the other victims? Do you think it's just too early on in the trial, or are people afraid to speak out?
I think people are afraid to speak out. It's so crazy. Celebrities love giving their political commentary all the time, but for some reason, no one's speaking out about Diddy. I mean, he's criminally charged. He's sitting in jail right now. The trial's underway, and it's crickets from all of these celebrities who used to attend his parties. I mean, I remember being in high school and hearing about all these Diddy parties, and everyone would be there who was a big shot. All of a sudden now, we're not hearing any names. We heard Kid Cudi, who's a rapper, but I mean, that's pretty much it. I think there was a football player who was mentioned that Cassie once dated as well, but it's been very vague on the celebrity names. Now, the reason why I'm also bringing that up is they're making it seem like these freak-offs were just between Diddy, Cassie, and a male prostitute or a couple of male prostitutes. There were other people there. Why aren't we hearing about that? Comey has a habit of burying these big-time names. Obviously, we all know that she was one of the prosecutors for Epstein, for Maxwell during the Epstein case. You know, they claim sex trafficking. Here they are saying, hey, the sex trafficking is a big sex trafficking case. But who were these prostitutes being trafficked to? That's one question that never gets answered.
Yeah, so riddle me this, because my instinct is, not having followed it as closely as many others, it always felt like, what exactly are you going after the guy for? I mean, so in other words, obviously he's a bad, Corn Pop was a bad dude. Like, he's doing some bad stuff. But it does have the feel, at least, of, okay, we need to release the dogs on this guy and go after him. Because if you were seriously going RICO and all that, you would not be just sitting around talking about some depraved, behavior with a prostitute, which makes headlines. But it's been bizarre to me. I have the same idea you do with the prosecutor. Like, why aren't we hearing that? And what's this case all about anyway? Like, what's going on here? It just feels like there's something going on here that we're not seeing.
Yeah, well, they'd have to make the argument that somehow, some way, Diddy was able to, or was trying to traffic these sex workers across state lines. Now, again, we're hearing about male escorts, and we're hearing that they willingly went. So it's not your typical sex trafficking case where you have my empathy. These men claim that they were paid. Cassie claimed that she paid them as well. She admitted that on the stand. So it's not something that they're really arguing on that front. It's just a matter of what was Diddy's involvement in all of this, and they're not making a clear angle on any of that. And I just think it's really telling that they're just sitting here going around giving these salacious stories about what their sex life was like. I don't think it's anyone's real business as to what sexually they were into. I would actually say and argue I don't think that's proper to even be coming up with that. It's more slanderous at this point. But also you got her. Okay, so the best way to understand this too, and so everyone at home knows this is why I feel this way. So, on Friday, Cassie was testifying and she was getting cross-examined by the defense attorneys. Her husband has been there for the most part of all of this. Like you mentioned, she's 8.5 months pregnant right now. She's detailing about how she's alleging that Diddy raped her back in 2018 after they went to dinner. And then she says, and she admits that even after the rape, that they started having consensual sex. But during all of this, she's now dating her soon-to-be husband. So it's a really messy situation. It sounds like there's a lot of swinging activity going on here. I'm just, again, not hearing racketeering, which is a huge crime to allege. And I'm not hearing anything about sex trafficking because they brought these guys onto the stands and no one's alleging it. Now, it's important to note that this trial never would have came about if there wasn't a massive settlement. So what happened was, if you guys remember, Democrats were trying to gun after President Trump. And so what they did is they manipulated laws in the state of New York so that there was no statute of limitation when filing civil lawsuits against anyone you accused of a sexual misconduct type of allegation. So we saw that lawsuit play out against Trump. But then Diddy got wrapped into it because Cassie filed a lawsuit and then 24 hours later he settled that lawsuit. Well, Cassie said on the stand that she settled it for $20 million. That's probably the figure he never wanted out there, but she put it out there. It's not just her, though. There was the man back in 2018, Jonathan Oddie, I believe his name is, who allegedly shot up the Trump Hotel in Miami. I believe he's currently sitting in jail for that right now. But there was a tape that went around, and he looked like he was mentally off. But we now know what he was saying was partially true.
The truth, yeah.
Yeah, because Cassie's sitting here and admitting that, yeah, they had sex. And there's also now a payout that went out to him for $5 million because he alleged that they gave him herpes.
It's such a crazy story, and I don't think people have a lot of confidence that Diddy will be held accountable for anything, but we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, thank you, Breanna. Okay, so coming up, Chris Bedford. He will explain why Republican infighting could derail Trump's big, beautiful bill. So stay tuned. Okay, let's be honest. Conservatives are winning. We love winning. The momentum, it is finally shifting, but we've still got a long way to go. And that is why Blaze TV exists, because we need to keep pushing with bold voices, with great reporting, and the stories that the corporate media won't touch. And when you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you are standing with a movement, and it is just $8 a month when you use the code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT right now, use the promo code BNT, and you can save $20 on an annual plan. So let's keep winning. Let's do it together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand. Well, Donald Trump, he has been promoting his big, beautiful bill as a vehicle to deliver his promises to the majority of Americans who elected him. And his promises include no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security.
But that bill has to go through Congress, a body made up of Republicans from both blue and red states.
So here to break down how some of these differences could derail Trump's bill is Chris Bedford, Blaze Media's DC correspondent. Hey, Chris.
Hey, good to be here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, we're so glad to have you here because your latest Beltway brief centers around what you call the SALT caucus. So tell us a little bit about them and why they are so hard to negotiate with.
Sure. The SALT caucus, which is a term that unfortunately we all have to learn now, at least for the next week or two or three or however long this whole thing takes, is a coalition of Republicans from blue states. That includes California, New Jersey, and New York that have come together to try and fight as hard as they possibly can to make their constituents be able to write off more and more of their incredibly high local taxes from their federal taxes. Now, back in the day, you used to be able to write off essentially whatever. So if New York decided to tax its residents $100,000, and then the local municipalities did as well, then they didn't have to owe any taxes on that money. They could write it all off at the federal government and let bygones be bygones. They made a big mistake in 2017 by hating on Trump, attacking the conservatives, attacking the GOP, and they lost all their friends, which is essentially a moderate blue state Republicans' only source of power is their friends, particularly their friendship with power and Republican leadership. So Republicans and conservatives turned around and said, you know what, we're sick of this deal. We're not going to do it anymore. You can write off no more than $10,000. We're not going to pay for the cruddy policies of your blue states and their incredible largesse and their incredible spending. They had a conniption. Every one of them ever since has been elected or reelected on the promise that they're going to bring back, they're going to bust up those caps. You're going to be able to write off more and more and more. So they said, and there's about 20-something of them. I wrote them all down in my piece. It took a while to research which ones are still talking about it, which ones have actually acquiesced on this deal. They've come together and said, listen, we're not voting for President Donald Trump's agenda unless you get to make it so that our richest constituents get to pay less in taxes. Now, some of them, the problem with negotiating with them is they have no actual demand other than bust the caps. They don't have a number that they say is more reasonable. Members are all over the place on what number they want. They're trying, some of them say 100,000, for example. Some of them say as a married person, $120,000 should be a couple's write-off. And I got an issue. If you're paying $120,000 in state and local taxes, you're not exactly someone who needs that money. You're not exactly a poor person. They're fighting essentially for rich Californians and rich New Yorkers and rich people from New Jersey. And as important as that might be to some of their constituents and to their donors, it's not very important to Republican voters by and large in this country. So they've kind of have to fight upstream. And the cost they've decided to take was the reconciliation bill, Donald Trump's agenda. Now, the issue here is that you're not supposed to negotiate as a caucus with a chairman. Individual members have relationships with the chairman. Furthermore, tax policy is supposed to be hammered out by the Ways and Means Committee. Only one of the SALT caucus's members is actually on the Ways and Means Committee. She said that she was okay with what Republicans offered, which is a $30,000 cap or a 300% increase in the cap. You can write off all that much in your taxes. They kicked her out. The only member of Ways and Means are like, you're out of the caucus now. And these members call themselves the saltiest of the SALT caucus, which is hysterical and ridiculous in and of itself. None of them have a demand. They refuse to make one. They say it's not their job to come up with the negotiation. Other people need to do it. Now, Republican leadership is just saying, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not sure what to do with you. I don't know exactly what you want. Some of you have put legislation on the floor in years past that would bring it to $20,000. We're offering $30,000, and now you're voting no and calling this insulting. So they're playing hardball here. They also have to contend with conservatives who would like to bust that cap to zero. Conservatives who'd like to hammer these guys. There's conservatives who aren't interested in actually fixing this. The SALT caucus comes back and says, guys, without us, if we get wiped out, we're a 20-seat Democrat majority. So you need us. But everyone has needs. Everybody except for the real extreme fiscal hawks wants more from this deal. That's what happens when you wrap all the legislation of an entire calendar year into one big, beautiful bill, is everybody needs to get their little project across the finish line. So lobbyists are showing up on the Hill. They're telling these congressmen, listen, you need a write-off for this. You got guys in California, Republicans, saying, well, we can't get rid of the Biden energy subsidies. We can't change that.
Right.
You've got 1,000,001 different asks, all of them extremely important to that member, all of them that member is threatening their vote. And at the same time, you've got conservatives saying, I'm not going to vote for this. I'm not going to back this. There are some ridiculous arguments going back and forth. People aren't really talking to each other like they ought to. The caucus essentially wants a backroom deal. They don't want to present their case to the entire conference because they know it'll be rejected. Now they're trying to work through Speaker Mike Johnson. Well, Speaker Mike Johnson, if you aren't paying close attention, it's just about the worst negotiator that Republicans have right now. The way that deals in this past year have even been passed at all is by rejecting him, by pushing him out of the room, by saying, hey, look, go do something else. We're going to work on this. And that's not because he's a bad guy or a liar. It's because he promises everyone in the world. He says, I'll get that for you. You want something? Sure. You want something? Sure. At the end of the day, politics is you have to say no to a lot of people. So he'll walk in the room and say, you can have this. And then his team will be doing backtracks and saying, oh my gosh, we can't have that. That's going to lose these votes. And he misspoke. So it's a difficult place to be for the administration and a difficult place to be for Congress. And these guys are just impossible to negotiate with.
Okay, but someone's going to have to step up in that sort of vacuum where this whole thing is going to fall apart. By the way, the SALT thing always cracks me up because it really is deal with the results of your own actions, right? I mean, there's a real injustice in my personal opinion here of why would we want to bail out, right, people who live in a state that has certain consequences. There's a real debate here. It actually there's a number of principled arguments you can make on either side, but nonetheless, Rebecca, our own Rebecca Zelko had an article talking about highlighting Republicans. It dovetails with what you're saying, who could derail the reconciliation bill. I guess I just want to go to, in conclusion, to what you're saying here in this excellent monologue. I mean, what are the chances this thing just goes off the rails? Because if you don't have a speaker who is authoritative, and you do have a couple issues like this that are thorny, let's just take this one. Let's just say we're just talking about SALT. The result of that easily could spin out of control very quickly.
Yeah, and some of the conservatives are already threatening to walk enough to actually sink this bill, saying they're not going to back this. It's got too much spending. I honestly think that they're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. There's a lot of President Trump's campaign promises are in here. The chairman of Ways and Means, Jason Smith, has figured out how to codify no tax on tips. He's figured out write-offs for first home buyers. He's figured out all these different things that the president promised, and he's actually cut money from the budget at the same time. But they want more. So you're going to end up, what's going to end up having to happen is he's now on his way back from the Middle East, or already back. The president's going to have to step in. Although he gets frustrated with this, he is more willing to do the work than any president since I've covered politics. He picks up the phone. He'll take the midnight meetings. He's willing to talk to these guys. He's willing to make deals. He's willing to sit down and hash it out. He's willing to hand out little carrots here and there. And he's got a very strong legislative team. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to take a really big stick. Fortunately for him, the moderates aren't known for sticking to their guns. They're not the suicide bombers of the GOP. Because they need that relationship with leadership, basically always fold. But they're talking the biggest talk I've ever seen from them. And this bill, there's not an option for it to go off the rails for Republicans. This is Donald Trump's agenda. If they can't put it aside and get it across, the anger from the base on anyone who's actually responsible will be so momentous. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative here or not. You're going to be swept out of office.
Well, and Chris, while we've got you here, we've just got a couple of seconds left. I would love to know what some of the biggest highlights were of President Trump's Middle East tour.
Well, it turns out that those two groups understand each other. The Saudis understand that President Trump likes to have a grand tour. He likes to be flattered. He likes people to roll out the red carpet for him, and they certainly did. President Trump also kind of realized that the Saudis like to be in charge of the Middle East. And until we come to an American foreign policy, maybe puts Iran first as opposed to the Saudis, That's what he's trying to do. He's doing realpolitik. There's some serious concerns about some of the deals he's looking at making, like the Christian persecution that's going on in Syria. But unless you want to invade Syria and replace that government, that's probably someone that's worth talking to. As he said in a really great and insightful line during his tour, it's up to God to judge the morality and the sins of these leaders. It's up to me to represent the interests of the people of the United States. His diplomatic tour has actually been so successful so far that he's even earned kudos from some blue state New England Democrats who are saying, he's actually done an interesting job. He's brought a lot of interesting parties together. He did a lot in the Middle East in his first term. I did not expect there to be a new round of Israeli peace accords. They actually figured that out. So it turns out when you project real American power with real American backing and you don't just play nice and mealy-mouth a bunch of LGBT stuff abroad, you might be able to get some things done.
It is unbelievable to me even to see some former Biden associates saying, I wish we had worked for someone who moved so fast, at least. And of course, that remarkable speech was a complete repudiation of everything neocon, maybe the strongest statement we've heard so far. But let's we got 60 seconds. Let's go to Russia and Ukraine. They're finally going to come to the negotiation table in Istanbul. Many of the right are crediting Trump with this development. It's been a long and rocky road, though, to get here. Any thoughts on that as this starts to begin seemingly in earnest?
It's a tenuous talk. I mean, Russia comes in with some pretty serious demands to keep everything they've taken, plus parts of Ukraine that they are not in control over yet, that are still being heavily contested, that you could say are more in Ukrainian control. They want a demilitarization of the Ukrainian government. That's not really something that's going to sit too well with a country that just got invaded and might get invaded someday again. Their basic peace terms are Russian victory, but we're not going to take the western part of the state, including the capital. So that's going to be a difficult thing. But with the president has decided he's not going to even attend this conference. So it's going to have to be on Europe to decide, listen, can we back this war? Do we want this war to continue? Do we have the funds? Do we have the weapons? Can we do this without United States support? Was it time to bring what has become a grinding, vicious, bloody trench warfare to an end?
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris Bedford, thank you so much for joining us. You did an amazing job on the rundown there. That was awesome. All right. Well, so coming up next, don't go anywhere. We have a MAHA mic drop from RFK Jr. right after this. Stay with us. There have been a whole lot of memorable moments from this week, but this one from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it may take the cake. Take a look.
38% of our youth now are diabetic or pre-diabetic. That was 0 when I was a kid. Anybody thinks that we did gold standard medicine in this country from these institutions, look at our children. They're the sickest children in the world. Laura, you say that excuse me, Congressman DeLauro, you say that you've worked for 20 years on getting food dye out. Give me credit. I got it out in 100 days. I'll give you that credit. All right, so let's work together and do something that we all believe in, which is have healthy kids in our country, for God's sake.
Amen. I love that point. It makes me so happy. So MAHA, it really seems to resonate with parents. You and I both have kids. How can lawmakers like Rosa DeLauro pretend to have been crusading for children's health when America's youth have become visibly less healthy? It's undeniable.
Well, Hilary, that's why that is our clip of the week on Friday. We chose that one in part because of the importance, and you're exactly right. How can any of these people? Because, it's as if children they weren't a constituency, right? They didn't have money behind them. And I think this movement is very important because all these other interests do not care about the health of children, and people who have moved their mouths, have not walked the walk. And so RFK is very refreshing to see him at work.
I love it. People have mixed feelings about, do we trust him? Do we not trust him? He's making things happen. So I do care about that. I love it. And I think we're seeing more stories in the mainstream media that we previously would not have seen because of his efforts. People are finally coming around to reporting things in a slightly more transparent manner. Obviously, people like us here at Blaze Media, we're at the forefront of that. But there was an article that really caught my eye on Utah being a place where there is a rising addiction among the people. And it's not what you would think. It's not drugs. It's not alcohol. It's soft drinks. And it's because, a lot of people that live in Utah happen to be Mormon and they don't drink alcohol. So they drink a lot of soda. And they have these concoctions they call dirty sodas, which I've had one, really delicious. So I understand why there's an epidemic here. But it's basically like a mocktail that you make with a soda. You use a Diet Coke or a Sprite or whatever. The one that I had was Diet Coke with coconut cream and a little bit of lime. It is delicious. But because these are so good and it's something that's, non-alcoholics, you could drink 10 of them and still drive home. There's not any repercussions other than now we're noticing that there is a rise in diabetes and other health conditions in these areas where soda is being consumed in such large quantities. Does that surprise you?
It does. That's wild. I hadn't heard of that until today, but dirty soda. And this is who makes these?
Well, so they take just like a regular Diet Coke or a Sprite, and then they add, just like if you were making a cocktail, without the alcohol. So you add, your cranberry juice and your whatever, and you make all these different things. But there are the interviews that I saw in some of these articles, there are people in Utah that say, I drink nothing but soda. So they've just cut water out completely because they have this addiction. So some of the people said they spent between $300 and $600 a week on soda. So it's just another example of why we need the MAHA movement to educate people. Drink what you want. That's why we live here in America. We want you to make your own choices. However, everything is permissible. Not everything is beneficial.
Because we're going to have to pay for, the healthcare system pays for this. So we do pay for, on health.
Yes.
We pay for sickness. And the other thing is, it strikes me like this is a great example of why we shouldn't be subsidizing big soda.
Yes, 100%. Another thing that I read about, and I'm not going to name any names, but several of our coworkers here live on energy drinks. So I was wondering if you'd heard of taurine. It's a common ingredient in drinks like Red Bull or Celsius, and it does have some health effects that are a little concerning.
So just I know that stuff is. I know that the health drink those energy drinks are bad for you, right? So this is where just so you know where we're coming from. I know. I look at them and I know it's bad. I used to on a road trip when I had to drive a lot in the Northeast. Sometimes it's quicker than flying to some places. I'd say, okay, end of the night, I wait till the very end, and then I just pound one of those. I know that it involves a crash too. It doesn't even keep you awake.
Right.
So I know that taurine is mentioned in there. I do associate it with being basically bad, and I try to stay away from them. But do I even want to know? What does it do?
Well, so I didn't know this either. I'd heard lots of things about why you shouldn't overdo energy drinks. Yeah. I've heard people have all kinds of heart problems and things like that. Taurine is something that's actually in your body. Your body naturally produces it. It's also been used to alleviate chemotherapy side effects in leukemia patients. But now they're saying if you have an additional intake of taurine, it might actually worsen blood cancers and speed up the production of leukemia cells. So it's just another reason why energy drinks, maybe not a good idea. Again, it's one of those things where everything in moderation, right? I feel like in America, we go to the extremes. We become obsessed with things. And the MAHA movement is trying to educate people on, it's not that you can't have a soda. It's not that you can't eat a cookie. It's how often do you do that? And just the transparency of these are the repercussions if you overdo it. If you consume, $300 worth of soda a week, there are going to be consequences. So that's what I'm most excited about, I think, with MAHA is it's just the transparency because we haven't gotten that in the past from big soda or big pharma. And they're really pushing for that so people can make their own choices and have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, and I don't want to subsidize obesity. We got enough problems as is. We are an obese society. We're a sick society. And when it comes to taurine, I know I don't want blood cancer.
No, me neither. So maybe drink some green tea if you need some energy. And so you had a story that I wanted to know more about regarding meat. Red meat.
Yeah. So at a line we published this, Meet the Enemy, How Protein Became, the left's newest microaggression. And this has always been fascinating to me, the commercial cultural movements of our time. I think we have a positive counter-revolution now, a real commercial cultural movement that's moving in a great direction. So what you see now is that the left is calling, pro meat eaters, like they have articles the opposite of this, where they're saying in lefty publications, meat is MAGA, right? How protein became the opposite of our headline, how protein became MAGA. Because weightlifters and people who care about their bodies online are talking increasingly about eating more meat and how this isn't bad for you. It's actually very good, especially if you're physically active and using that energy. You need that red meat energy. But this there's a lot of aspects to this, but this really starts or gains steam with the climate movement because the idea is that cows, right, and meat all they chew up a lot of grass and they methane comes out of them,
Right.
And they're helping to ruin the climate. So keeping all this cattle is bad for the earth, and therefore we have to stop eating red meat. We have to stop making that cool. And, we need to eat more bugs, right? We need to eat the bugs.
The cockroaches and the worms.
So, I mean, but here's the thing to realize. I mean, you cannot separate politics from food. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and it's going on right now. And there's a war being waged over the meaning of protein and red meat.
It is the most ridiculous thing. I just feel like we've been fed so many lies that butter is bad, eggs are bad, meat is bad. Again, it's one of those situations where you go everything in moderation. I mean, you can't sit and eat butter all day and expect to be healthy. But I don't know why at some point we've been fed this lie that if you eat red meat, if you consume butter, you're going to die sooner. You look at communities like the Amish or the Mennonites that consume those things on a regular basis, and they're some of the healthiest groups in our country.
Oh yeah, my great grandmother, 101, bacon grease was used in everything.
Well, I'm going to order steak tonight, and then I'm going to slather of roll in butter. Yes. Okay, we're going to be back to wrap up the show, so stay tuned. Go get you a steak.
Look, the FBI is 38,000 when we're fully manned, which we're not. In the National Capital Region, in the 50-mile radius around Washington, D.C., there were 11,000 FBI employees. That's like a third of the workforce. A third of the crime doesn't happen here. So we're taking 1,500 of those folks and moving them out. Every state's getting a plus up. And I think when we do things like that, we inspire folks in America to become intel analysts and agents and say, we want to go work at the FBI because we want to go fight violent crime and we want to get sent out into the country to do it. And that's what we're doing. In the next 3, 6, 9 months, we're going to do that hard. And, I didn't know that I was going to do this, but I'm going to announce it on your show anyway. This FBI is leaving the Hoover building because this building is unsafe for our workforce, and we want the workforce.
You just gave up a big nugget
we
there.
want the American men and women to know, if you're going to come work at the premier law enforcement agency in the world, we're going to give you a building that's commensurate with that. And that's not this place.
Woo! Kash Patel dropped some big news. Matthew, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I'm okay with what's unclear to me is like, where is it going? I mean, he's sort of saying, I have mixed feelings, to be honest. I mean, he's sort of saying we need a bigger, better building, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Right? And okay, I'm amenable to that. I'm sure that the Hoover building is old. I'm sure he's got a point, right. But a lot depends in some of the details here, because there's one argument that would say, take everything out of DC, get out of the Hoover building so you get out of the swamp, right? Which is sort of what he's doing, sending people across the country, which seems to make a lot of sense. And then there's also, we're going to build, the biggest, baddest building ever, which I want to trust Kash and Dan.
Yep.
But I also, it's only been a few months. Do I want to build the FBI a big, beautiful new building to spy on Americans? I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, and what was the catalyst for this? Did they bring in a mold sniffing dog? Yeah. I mean, what was it that they were like, this building is unsafe? But yeah, I'm with you. I give it some time before we spend that kind of coin on a brand new building. I don't know. But
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Well, we'll find out, I guess. We'll find out.
Well, thanks for letting me come hang out today. I really appreciate it. It was so fun. Jill will be back on Monday. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. That helps other people discover the show. So we'll be back to break everything down on Monday. See you then.